Why should we give land to the Indians when it clearly says on the paper it belonged to the farmers?
But surely you must realize that this is their home. These indigenous tribes have been living on this land for hundreds of years.
Listen, this world is not fair. Some people win, some people lose. The whole world think they can tell Brazil what to do with her land. Sorry, no. We do what we please.
زمین ما در جنب و جوشی بیوقفه، تصنیفی پرخروش از نیروهای طبیعت، متحد و یک صدا، حیات بخش 4 گوشه جهان. و چه بسیار فرهنگ‌های دنیا که از دیرباز آن را مادر خویش خوانده‌اند.
We live on an incredibly beautiful planet. A home that we will hopefully pass on to generations to come. But as the years go by, it's becoming increasingly hard to imagine what kind of a world we're leaving behind us. We've spent the last 4 years traveling around the world, filming the stark reality that people now face from the threat of ecological collapse. It's now become very clear to us that there's one thing driving the destruction of our ecosystems faster than anything else. Let us show you how this very same thing might just also be our salvation.
Climate and environmental scientists warn that we are fast approaching the point of no return if we don't make a substantial course reversal.
We see really serious catastrophic effects in the next few years, certainly in the next decade or two. The world will be completely different from the way it is now.
از سال 1900 میلادی فجایع آب و هوایی در تمامی جهان خیز عظیمی برداشته است. مجموع فجایع آب و هوایی 50 سال اخیر به 4 برابر تعدادش در 100 سال قبل از خود رسیده است.
We began to work together to move this issue onto the global center stage. There was a lot of discussion about the contribution from buildings and from industrial factories, but I became aware during that same period of time that there was another factor that was going undiscussed, and that is the role of animal agriculture, which I could see was playing some significant role around the planet. But this was the elephant in the room no one wanted to talk about.
Whatever environmental issue you want to look at, from species loss to water pollution to water use to climate change, animal agriculture is one of the top causes.
The critical, widespread negative impact of animal agriculture on our planet is undeniable. Severe global crises, from climate change and environmental damage to species extinction, hunger, poverty, disease, and antibiotic resistance, all of these have direct connections to animal agriculture and the massive inefficiency of our current food production systems.
سالها پیش در 2009 میلادی ویکیلیکس گفتگوی محرمانه شرکت نسله با مقامات آمریکایی را در گزارشی تحت عنوان افق دید آشکار کرد. عوامل شرکت نسله با استناد به تحقیقاتشان گفته بودند آب شیرین دنیا 30 سال بیشتر دوام نخواهد آورد. در این سند درخواست جهانی گوشت جزو اصلی ترین علل کشیده شدنمان به سوی این مقصد ویران عنوان شده بود.
If you look at the impact that food choice has on global warming, it's very significant. Eating meat is huge for global climate, and that's something where personal choice is the determining factor. So there's the only case I can think of where individual human choice would have a big effect would be food.
We're now over the line. And the idea that we're going to double meat production between now and 2050, this is just unsustainable. This is going to have to give. Our diet is taking us to an abyss.
A significant reason why livestock production has been having such a huge impact on greenhouse gas emissions is because of the large surfaces of forests that have been destroyed in order to make room for pastures and for the growth of soybean and maize for feedstock production.
روزگاری زندگی با اعجاب‌انگیزترین اشکالش در جنگل‌هایمان موج می‌زد. این گذشت تا ولعی سیریناپذیر برای گوشت و لبنیات در بشر سر برآورد. تشدید درخواست گوشت زمین بیشتر و بیشتری می‌طلبید. پس با اره و آتش به جنگل‌های بکر تاختیم و به هوای خوردن حیوانات همه چیز را از سر راه برداشتیم. چرای بی‌امان این حیوانات که آزادانه امکان گشت و گذار نداشتند، این چراگاه‌ها را به سرعت به ورطه نابودی کشاند. پس باز جنگل‌های بیشتری را سر راهمان با خاک یکسان کردیم، ذرت و سویای تراریخته به جایشان نشاندیم و سپس با آفتکش، علفکش و کود شیمیایی به جانشان افتادیم. دامپروری چهره سیاره‌مان را دیگرگون کرده است. سطوح سبز رنگ سهم محصولات زراعی بشر را نشان می‌دهد. مساحتی پهناور در سر تا سر جهان. اما اکنون دامپروری پهنه عظیمی از کره زمین را که به رنگ قرمز می‌بینید به اشغال خود درآورده است. بسیار وسیع‌تر از سهم محصولات زراعی بشر.
Almost all the Earth's surface is now bears the mark of some kind of human impact, and most of that is livestock production.
Agriculture has transformed the planet like nothing else. To produce milk, we farm an area about the size of Brazil. To produce beef, we farm an area about the size of Canada, the United States, the whole of Central America, Venezuela, Colombia, and Ecuador combined. To produce eggs, we farm an area the size of Sweden. To produce aquaculture feed, an area about the size of the UK. A plant-based diet would reduce the amount of land required to produce our food by 3.1 billion hectares. That's an area the size of the entire African continent.
آمازون بزرگترین جنگل بارانی گرمسیری دنیاست. وسعت این زیست بوم کهن و رنگارنگ به تدریج کوچکتر می شود. بسیاری بر این گمانند که عمده سویای برزیل برای مصرف بشر کشت می شود. اما در واقع کمتر از 6% سویای دنیا سر از بشقاب‌هایمان در می آورد. بخش اعظمش برای تهیه خوراک دام کشت می شود. این سویا به تمام دنیا صادر شده، به خورد میلیاردها مرغ، ماهی پرورشی، خوک و گاوی داده می شود که هر روزه می خوریم. جنگل‌ها نه تنها زیستگاه میلیون‌ها گونه وحشی حیوانی و گیاهی‌اند، بلکه نقش بسزایی در تنظیم جو سیاره‌مان دارند. هر روز آرام آرام دی اکسید کربن جذب می‌کنند و میلیون‌ها تن اکسیژن تازه به هوا باز می‌گردانند. هر سال بیش از 7 میلیون هکتار جنگل از بین می‌رود. چیزی حدود مساحت کشور پاناما. گمان می‌رود اکنون حدود نیمی از جنگل‌های بالغ استوایی زمین نابود شده باشد. طبق پیشبینی برخی دانشمندان، اگر دنیا چاره‌ای اساسی نیندیشد، فقط 10% جنگل‌ها تا سال 2030 میلادی باقی خواهد ماند.
One of the most precious things we have in the world is our rainforests. The rainforests are literally being chewed away by farmers who know they can make money by cutting another acre and then another acre and then another acre for need.
Aí nosso avô naquele tempo, cacique, então já falou, olha, você vai sofrer muito, porque o branco ruralismo.
هر ساله روستای صدها نفر از اعضای قبایل بومی را در جنگل‌های بارانی آمازون به آتش می‌کشند. آنان را به زور از اراضیشان بیرون می‌رانند و بسیاریشان نیز به دست شبه نظامیان شرکت‌های کشت و صنعت کشته می‌شوند تا سرزمین جنگلیشان را به اراضی کاشت سویای دام تبدیل کنند. گورانیکایوآ در ماتوگروسو دو سول جزو بد اقبالترین این قبایل بوده است.
Para nós indígenas, antigamente as florestas que é a nossa casa. Quem começou a destruir a nossa aldeia é através da agropecuária. Então derrubaram as nossas matas, destruindo os animais, os rios.
Eu tô falando, agora vai plantar soja, aí depois vai passar veneno, né? Tudo coisa. Vai passar adubo também, vai cair tudo no rio. E nós revoltando nos terras para sustentar a nossa família. Né?
So there was actually a report that came out in 2018, and they found that the world's top 5 livestock corporations now release more annual greenhouse gas emissions than ExxonMobil, Shell, and BP. It is crazy when you think about it, because the EU is spending £24 billion of taxpayers' money on livestock farming each year. And this is at a time when we are facing an ecological collapse and we drastically need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So it's no surprise that people are asking a lot of questions now about the fact that there seem to be some serious conflicts of interest going on here.
There's some very heavy lobbying going on of government, and I think that happens throughout the world. And it's just a historic thing that needs to be, I think, rebalanced.
As I've mentioned to you over the phone, I've worked with a number of large livestock companies around the world. So the way it works is that a representative from pays us usually up to €500,000. We then target the relevant politicians from different governments around the world, and motions are made to pass legislation in favour of the company's business strategies. For environmental policy, we can be very persuasive in order to abolish or heavily relax environmental regulations in government, so our clients have more freedom in their work. The other day we managed to kill proposed legislation that would have had a huge impact on the industry based on a report from the UNFAO. You know, the industry is just concerned with growth, but the environmental data that's coming out now, it's really making that difficult for them.
Today, democracy does not always function as well as it should because of the huge influence that agribusiness corporations and livestock producers in particular exercise on decision-making.
A former director of the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, Dr. Samuel Jutzi, warned as far back as 2010 that interventions by agribusiness lobbyists were blocking reforms that would offer better standards for human health and preserving the environment. Big animal agribusiness corporations and food producers' influence over political decisions about the regulation of their industry has long been a concern for campaigners who see the narrow interests of the industry taking widespread control.
If we have any doubt about how powerful this influence is, we can recall that, for example, when the Advisory Committee on Dietary Guidelines in the US made recommendations to the US government as to how dietary guidelines should be shaped, they were blocked by this very powerful lobby of agribusiness interests.
در سال 2013 میلادی سازمان خاروبار و کشاورزی ملل متحد گزارشی استثنایی منتشر کرد. پیکار با تغییر اقلیم از رهگذر احشام. این گزارش میگوید دامپروری بیش از مجموع تمام اشکال حمل و نقل دنیا گاز گلخانه‌ای تولید می‌کند. تعداد روزافزونی از دانشمندان به این نتیجه می‌رسند که صنعت دامپروری حتی از آنچه در گزارش فاو آمده مخرب‌تر است.
There are close ties between the research organisations and government policy and industry. It's very pervasive because livestock industries depend on government policies that support them.
The FAO report was prepared within the FAO by specialists of agriculture and livestock production, not by specialists of the environmental issues associated with agricultural production. I believe that a more serious concern, of course, is that the International Meat Association was involved in preparing the report, which does raise the question of the independence with which the study was prepared.
Government policy in that regard is not for the benefit of the land, it's for the benefit of the industry.
فاو این گزارش را با همکاری کشورهای عضو، سازمانهای غیردولتی و بسیاری سازمانهای دیگر تهیه کرده بود، از جمله فدراسیون تولید کنندگان خوراک اروپا، فدراسیون بین‌المللی لبنیات، دبیرخانه بین‌المللی گوشت، کمیته بین‌المللی تخم مرغ و شورای بین‌المللی طیور. در این صنعت چند هزار میلیارد دلاری آیا خود همین مؤسسات نیستند که گزارش‌های علمی ضد دامپروری را به چشم تهدید می‌بینند؟ کمتر کسی هست که اقیانوس را بهتر از دکتر سیلویا ارل بشناسد. دکتر ارل اولین زنی بود که دانشمند ارشد اداره ملی اقیانوسی و جوی آمریکا شد. او همچنین با پیشی گرفتن از دیگران رکورد مدت زمان غواصی غیر متصل در کف اقیانوس را شکست.
When I was a child, the idea of a dead zone in the ocean was not even in our vocabulary. But in the 20th century, as agriculture began to greatly expand, the areas around the coast began to show signs of wear and tear. The first, most notorious spotlight area, I think, was off the Gulf of Mexico. And it has simply grown over the years, an annual phenomenon that is coincident with the application of massive amounts of fertilizer.
با کودهای نیتروژنی میافتیم به جان صدها میلیون هکتار زمینی که قرار است خوراک دام به عمل آورد. پساب نیتروژن از این اراضی به رودها و سرانجام به اقیانوس‌هایمان راه می‌یابد. آب پر نیتروژن بستری است برای رشد بی‌رویه جلبک‌ها و پیدایش پدیده جلبک شکافی. گاهی چنان پهناور که حتی از فضا هم پیداست. این جلبک‌ها اکسیژن آب را می‌بلعند و حیات آنجا را به نابودی می‌کشانند. با تشدید درخواست گوشت، این نواحی بیجان کم اکسیژن نیز رو به گسترش نهاده است.
There are hundreds of dead zones that have developed all around the coastlines of the world. And Okay, people say, that's too bad for the fish. So sorry, fish. But we need to understand that what we do to the ocean, we're doing to ourselves. I want others to see and to see for themselves. This is all we've got, this little blue miracle.
برخی بر این گمانند که نشاندن گوشت ماهی به جای باقی گوشت‌ها در تغذیه به نفع سیاره ماست. اما سخت در اشتباهند. با مرگ اقیانوس احتمالاً نسل بشر نیز از صفحه روزگار محو خواهد شد، چون نیمی از اکسیژنمان را اقیانوس تأمین می‌کند. چنان که در مجله علمی صاحب نام نیچر آمده، از دهه 1950 میلادی تقریباً 90% تمام ماهیان بزرگ اقیانوس را از دست داده ایم. یکی از مفصل‌ترین پژوهش‌های انجام شده روی ذخایر ماهیان باز هم در مجله نیچر پیش بینی می‌کند که با نرخ فعلی صید، صنعت ماهیگیری دنیا در عرض کمتر از 30 سال فرو می‌پاشد. IPBES، سازمان بین‌الدولتی که وضعیت تنوع زیستی دنیایمان را می‌سنجد، ماهیگیری را متهم ردیف اول انقراض موجودات دریایی می‌داند. ولع ما برای خوردن ماهی‌ها دارد حیات اقیانوس‌هایمان را می‌بلعد.
Today we have agreed on fishing opportunities for European fishermen worth more than 5 billion euros and benefiting more than 50,000 fishermen. The catches agreed today will continue to make the European fishing industry highly profitable also in 2019.
نروژ، کشوری زیبا با چشماندازهای دلانگیز و در عین حال حقایق تلخی چند در پشت پرده. نروژ یکی از بزرگترین صادرکنندگان ماهی پرورشی در دنیاست. صنعتی با ارزش اقتصادی میلیاردها یورو. با نزدیک شدن بخش اعظم ماهی‌های بزرگ وحشی به لبه پرتگاه انقراض، این صنعت به پرورش ماهی در محیط کنترل شده آبزی پروری روی آورده است. نروژ بیش از هر کشور دیگری در دنیا سالمون و ماهی روغن پرورش می‌دهد. حدود 70% ماهی‌های مصرفی فعلی خروجی همین مزارع مصنوعی پرورش ماهی است. با چپاندن هزاران ماهی در قفس‌های بسیار تنگ، بیماری بیداد می‌کند و شپش‌ها بی‌امان می‌تازند. امری که این صنعت را با معضلی اساسی روبرو کرده است. در نتیجه بی‌محابا دست به دامن آفتکش‌ها، گندزداها و آنتیبیوتیک‌ها می‌شوند که ماهی‌ها را تا رسیدن به سن فروش سر پا نگه دارند. برای شپش زدایی ماهی‌ها، قایق‌های پمپی مخصوصی مجهز به مکنده‌های عظیم ماهی‌ها را می‌بلعد. سپس در معرض دمای بسیار بالایی قرار می‌گیرند یا در محلولی شیمیایی غوطه‌ور می‌شوند که پیش از بازگرداندنشان به قفس‌ها بیشتر شپش‌ها را از بین می‌برد. برای از بین بردن انگل‌ها و بیماری‌ها، ماهی‌ها را از جمله در هیدروژن پراکسید و آزامنتیفوس غوطه‌ور می‌کنند و ترکیباتی مثل تفلوبنزورون، امامکتین و دیفلوبنزورون به خوردشان می‌دهند که ماهیتاً سمی‌اند. پژوهشگران دریافته‌اند بقایای این ترکیبات شیمیایی می‌تواند وارد بدن ماهی شود و نهایتاً سر از بشقاب غذای ما درآورد. این رویه کم و بیش در مورد همه ماهی پروری‌های دنیا صدق می‌کند. تارین بیشاپ، کنشگر محیط زیست، دیداری تدارک دیده است با سازمان محیط زیستی گرین واریرز واقع در برگن در ساحل غربی نروژ. گروه گرین واریرز سالها مشغول تحقیق روی آثار ویرانگر پرورش ماهی بر اکوسیستم محلی بوده و حالا قرار است تارین را با روی دیگر آن آشنا کند. چهره‌ای مهیب‌تر، پنهان پشت نقاب آب. عمق پیمای مخصوصی امکان دیدن بستر زیر قفس‌ها را برایشان مهیا کرده است. سراسر کف اقیانوس لایه ضخیمی از لجن لرد بسته است، مخلوطی از فضولات ماهی‌ها، باکتری‌ها و خوراک نخورده، پر از بقایای آفتکش افزوده شده به خوراک ماهی‌ها. تحقیقات اخیر نیز نشان داده است حجم غولاسای آفتکش‌هایی که ماهی پروری‌ها به اکوسیستم دریایی جهان گسیل می‌کنند، آثار فاجعه باری بر تنوع زیستی اقیانوس بر جای می‌گذارد. این لجن گاز متان گرمایش‌زای زیادی نیز از خود ساطع می‌کند. پژوهشگران دانشگاه آکسفورد دریافته‌اند برخی انواع آبزی پروری اکنون از تولیدی‌های گوشت گاو هم متان بیشتری آزاد می‌کنند. لیو هولمفیورد رئیس اداره شیلات نروژ است. در نروژ که بودیم به اطلاعمان رساندند او نه تنها ناظر صنعت ماهی پروری کشور بلکه سهامدار یکی از بزرگترین شرکت‌های ماهی پروری نروژ هم هست. گروه‌های محیط زیستی موقعیت او را مصداق بارزی از تعارض منافع می‌دانند. هولمفیورد درخواست ملاقات تارین را برای پاسخ به پرسش‌هایی درباره وضعیت آبزی پروری نروژ پذیرفته است.
Well, fish farming is quite a new industry in Norway. It started back in the 1960s with some local entrepreneurs starting with hobby, and it's grown until it's a billion euro industry today. And seafood is the second largest export industry in Norway, and fish farming accounts for 2/3 of the export value of seafood.
So recently, we found out that you also have shares in one of the largest fish farm companies in Norway. Do you not feel that that's a conflict of interest?
Of course, there could be a conflict of interest, but this is a fact that's been known since before I got this position, and I've been open about it. I'm not involved in the business from day to day or at any. So it's, and if there's we have, and I have. Sorry, I have to. Do you have to start over again? Vad heter det för något då? So all the decisions that I made will either be for the whole industry, not especially for this fish farm, or it's only an advice to the politicians, and the politicians are setting the limits and the actual regulations. So if there's an actual case handling regarding this company, then I will step aside.
On a few jobs when I was working here over the years as a diver, we used to be around the fish farms cleaning the dead deceased fish from the nets and fixing the nets, etc. after storms. And on occasion we'd seen some of the boats coming in to clean the lice off them it's quite a lot of dead fish, you know, diseased or they've died, but it's a lot of pink mush, you know, not healthy. Look, having seen what I've seen and worked on the various sites round about where I've been in Scotland, I wouldn't eat farmed salmon. No, I would have. pretty rank.
Salmon is marketed as healthy. It's also marketed in a very devious way, deceptive way, that they think it's a wild product. So it's a fake product, it's a fatty product, it's contaminated, it's marketed as healthy, but it's not. So salmon, if you see salmon, alarm bells should start ringing.
It's pretty grim when you dive down to the bottom of the cages because, you know, we always see the bottom full of dead fish. And it's basically because many of these fish are so diseased, so parasite-ridden and laden with chemicals that they become sick and they live out their sad, short lives basically looking like zombies. You know, you don't see this when you go to the restaurant or the supermarket, but this is basically what a lot of the fish actually look like before it ends up on our plates. So tonight, Don wanted to show us how much of the farmed fish actually dies because of the very unnatural and unsanitary ways that they are kept. And they have rows of very large metal containers that they are constantly filling up with the dead fish, and I have to say that the smell as we get closer is actually pretty disgusting.
So this is the sordid side of salmon farming in Scotland. This is the dirty secrets the industry don't want you to see. This is disease-ridden farmed salmon. It's 15 to 20% fat. That's where the contaminants, the cancer-causing contaminants, PCBs, dioxins, and the artificial colorings are. So this is something to be avoided at all costs. This is the salmon farm just here. We got freedom information, data from the Scottish Environment Protection Agency showing the use of over 50 tons of formaldehyde, not just at this site but other sites across Scotland. Is formaldehyde may cause cancer, suspected of causing genetic defects, toxic if swallowed, may cause respiratory irritation, causes damage to organs. Do not breathe.
One of the fish farm workers told us that the workers come down to the farm early in the morning, spraying the chemicals into the fish cages. So they're obviously spraying something down there in the water. The guy who gave us the tip-off said that toxic chemicals are widely used across Scotland, including formaldehyde and also hydrogen peroxide. And these are supposed to treat the diseases and lice problems which are both rampant across the fish farms. You know, these are not chemicals that you want in your body. Whatever he's spraying must be pretty powerful if he needs to wear full protective chemical suit and a face mask.
در عصری که اقیانوس به زباله‌دان 7 میلیارد انسان تبدیل می شود و صنعت ماهی پروری شکم ماهی‌هایش را با ترکیبات شیمیایی پر می کند، گوشت ماهی هیچگاه این چنین سمی نبوده است.
You know, our oceans have become humanity's sewers. Everything eventually flows into the sea. So if you had a, time machine that go back before the Industrial Revolution, it's a different story. But now, the highest levels of many of these persistent organic pollutants, we're talking about, DDT, PET and PCBs and dioxins. The highest levels in our food supply are found in the aquatic food chain. Fish are not the safest choice anymore.
So Tony, it's great to see you.
Great to see you as well. Thanks for coming.
Not at all. Thank you. A pleasure being here. So I wanted to ask you if you could share with us what exactly it was you began to feel when you realized something was going wrong.
I was exhausted more than usual. And then I was losing short-term memory, and that scared the hell out of me. And then I tore my rotator cuffs in a really intense snowboarding accident. And the doctor said, "Do you want to do your metals test?" And I said, I got my amalgams out 25 years ago. He goes, "There's so many metals in the environment, you should do it." So I did. I get a phone call a week later, and I said to my assistant, "Just have him send the report." And he said, "No, it's an emergency. He has to speak to you." And it's like, no one wants to hear that. And so I called him up, and he said, "Tony, I showed your blood tests. You have extreme mercury poisoning. On a 0 to 5 scale, which is what we measure, 5 being toxic, you're 123. The doctor said, how long has this man been in the hospital? And I just got off stage. So I said, I can't understand this. So I went out, and they thought, maybe someone was trying to poison me because the number was so high. And I was very disciplined. I was a vegan for 12 years, and then they just went salad fish. And they brought the medical group out here, and they looked at it, and I found this man named Dr. Shade, who's the only guy who has an ideation process where you can see where the mercury came from, and it was fish. It's been 3 years, and I had some severe moments. It burned a hole in my esophagus, and I literally collapsed. I lost a third of my blood supply. I could have died. I lost half my hemoglobin.
People begin to lose their hair, their memory. They lose their memories, as you were doing, as you noticed. But they can also have headaches. They can complain of fatigue. They can also have depression. What we're seeing now is with the toxic environmental exposure, and especially with the mercury, methyl mercury in fish, is that everyone has got to be careful because the levels are going up.
Udo, tell me, because your specialty is in this, how do you get the fish oils that we all need for the brain and for the body if we can't have fish? What do you suggest?
Well, we used to get them from fish oils.
Yes.
But we can actually get them from vegetables. Flax is the richest source of omega-3 that everybody thinks should come from fish oil. If you get enough of that as starting material, your body will make what the fish oils make, and it'll be clean.
Many people take fish oils or have fish for the long-chain omega-3 fatty acids. And you have to ask yourself the question, well, where do the fish get them from? And it turns out they get them from the algae in the ocean. They get them from plant food. So if you want the purest form of the long-chain, ready-made omega-3 fatty acids, the best way of doing that is simply to take an algae supplement, because then you've got the purest form of it, and you don't have the extra risks of having the toxins and the heavy metals and the saturated fat and the cholesterol that you would get from eating a fish.
پژوهش همتاسنجی شده مؤسسه اقیانوس شناسی اسکریپس در دانشگاه سندیگو کالیفرنیا جزو بزرگترین تحقیقات دنیا روی آلاینده‌های ماهی است. این دانشمندان در بدن ماهیان تمام اقیانوس‌های دنیا مواد سمی یافتند.
Nobody would go to the nearest body of water and put in like a cup and drink the water. You're basically getting the concentrated toxins if we're eating fish.
اقیانوس‌هایمان معدن پلاستیک نیز شده است. بزرگی اقیانوس‌ها کار تعیین دقیق اصلی‌ترین منبع این پلاستیک را برای هر پژوهشگری دشوار می‌کند. زباله‌دان بزرگ اقیانوس آرام با مساحتی حدود 1.6 میلیون کیلومتر مربع می‌تواند فرصت بی‌بدیلی برای بهتر شناختن معضل روزافزون ریز پلاستیک دریا در اختیارمان بگذارد. گروهی از دانشمندان سازمان اوشن کلیناپ که مدتی مشغول بررسی این زباله‌دان بودند، در کمال تعجب دریافتند منشأ بخش اعظم این پلاستیک را نه نی‌های پلاستیکی کهنه یا بطری‌های دورریخته آب معدنی، بلکه هزاران تن تور ماهیگیری تشکیل می‌دهد که در دریا به هزاران میلیارد تکه ریز پلاستیک تبدیل شده‌اند. مقاله تازه‌ای در مجله نیچر منشأ حدود 80% پلاستیک اقیانوس آرام را تورهای رها شده ماهیگیری عنوان کرد. بسیاری از دانشمندان متفق القولند که یکی از مؤثرترین اقدام‌های فردی برای حل معضل انباشت پلاستیک در اقیانوس پرهیز از خوردن ماهی و روی آوردن به رژیم‌های گیاهی است.
At least half of the plastic in the sea today comes from discarded or lost fishing gear. Because all those nets, all those lines, all that stuff, it's just become a plasticized ocean. But we have a chance. We have a chance right now to change our eating habits.
There's an estimate that there's over 5 trillion tons of plastic currently floating in the ocean. It's absolutely everywhere. Everywhere we look, we found microplastics. whether it's at the polar regions, in remote islands. Also, if we're looking on the surface or the seabed, and everywhere in between, we find microplastics. We've also found microplastics in just about every animal group that we've looked in. We've been sampling for microplastics for quite a while now, and we found that there's 27 times more bits of plastic than there are fish larvae.
میکروپلانکتون ها در جای جای اقیانوس ها حضور دارند و پالیدخوار محسوب می شوند. پژوهشگران مشاهده کرده اند پلانکتون ها با قرار گرفتن در مجاورت ریز پلاستیک بیخبر از ماهیت سمی این ریز ذرات همواره آن را می بلعند. مواد شیمیایی پیش چشم پژوهشگران در اندامهای این ریز موجودات دریایی انباشته می شود. سپس خود این پلانکتون‌های سمی طعمه ماهی‌های بزرگتر می‌شوند. محققان از زیست انباشت این مواد شیمیایی در بدن بسیاری از ماهی‌های مصرفی امروز خبر داده‌اند. پژوهشی در دانشگاه پلیموت بیش از 1/3 تمام ماهی‌های آزمایش شده را حاوی ریز پلاستیک یافت. ما نیز با خوردن این ماهی‌های آلوده همان سموم را وارد بدنمان می‌کنیم و تحقیقات اخیر نیز از وجود سازوکار سم انباشت مشابهی در بدن انسان حکایت می‌کند.
Our scientists tell us we're now in the 6th extinction event of life on this earth. It doesn't even make the headlines. No one even knows about it.
Saya kesemai, walaupun ni mati kena, hati mereka ni mati kena. Nani ke, jauh besar pani te. Sia hanya semene kati semene. Tony na waktu keban. Thera ate nekeni. Saya tidak di saya metani. Saya nunu ada yang nunu ni. Saya potongnya nunu. Thera ati mereka. Ayu romera. Thera na casa na henikan hacker. Ate di terlihat. Nekeni, saya keper pasta di hoka. Saya lah yang ngelawai kena. Ni nane, neno kapan? Tahu apa ni ti? Thera ati mereka nyalo balik apa? Na yuk keper ni kere. Thera ni kalau le, nyasa dia ni. Tahu apa ni? Nikah oleh. Na, waikna. Oti peti apa ni?
We've had 5 mass extinction events on this planet in 450 million years. Let me be clear on this. The last time we had an extinction event of this magnitude was 65 million years ago.
It's incredibly sad to realize just how many species, both in the oceans and on land, that we're losing at the moment. And it's up to all of us to make sure that this doesn't happen in the future.
Today, over 26,000 species are currently threatened with extinction, and the most important driver of that is our use of land for agriculture.
Over time, livestock have been a major driver of biodiversity loss.
Some have predicted that by 2045, the species loss will be so great that we won't recover. The Earth will suffer ecological collapse. And the biggest thing you and I can do is change our diet.
برخی دانشمندان این بحران را انهدام زیستی نامیده‌اند. در مجله Science of Total Environment چاپ دانشگاه بین‌المللی فلوریدا می‌خوانیم که عامل اصلی افت تنوع زیستی دامپروری است. مقاله‌ای در مجله ساینس می‌گوید اگر کل دنیا به رژیمی کاملاً گیاهی روی آورد، بیش از 75% اراضی قابل کشت دنیا آزاد می‌شود و می‌توان بسیاری از جنگل‌هایی را که پیشتر برای دامپروری قطع شده اند دوباره احیا کرد. گروه‌های زیادی در سرتاسر دنیا دقیقاً به همین کار همت گمارده‌اند. اکوزیا، جویشگر آنلاینی شبیه گوگل، از دل یکی از همین طرح‌ها برآمده است که درآمد حاصل از تبلیغاتش را برای کاشت مجدد درختان به جوامع محلی می‌پردازد. ماریسیو یکی از جنگلبانان اصلی اکوزیاست که خود را وقف احیای جنگل بارانی در برزیل کرده است.
Plantei minha primeira árvore, tinha 5 anos de idade. Eu nem imaginava que 20 anos depois, esse esforço tão pequeno teria virado uma das iniciativas que mais plantou árvores na história do Brasil. Foram mais de 2,5 milhões de árvores, 2.000 hectares plantados, muitas áreas preservadas pela ação de combate a incêndios florestais.
درختان به دنیایمان حیات می‌بخشند. کاشتن هر درختی پاشیدن بذر آینده انسان بر روی این سیاره است. نتایج تازه‌ترین مطالعه مفصل درباره آثار زیست محیطی تغذیه‌مان به همت جمعی از پژوهشگران بین‌المللی در مجله‌ای همتاسنج به چاپ رسید. پژوهشگران این مطالعه استثنایی با هدایت دکتر مارکو اسپرینگمن از دانشگاه آکسفورد در انگلستان دریافتند اگر قرار باشد کوچکترین اقبالی در حفظ دمای زمین زیر آستانه خطرناک 2 درجه سلسیوسی توافقنامه پاریس داشته باشیم، کشورهای پردرآمد باید در اقدامی قاطعانه حدوداً از 80% گوشت مصرفیشان بکاهند.
Policymakers have been very reluctant to address the livestock issue. It's entirely out of keeping with the urgency of the crisis that we're facing.
Hi, Otto Brockway for Brockstar Films. This is a question for Commissioner Hogan. The scientists at Oxford University have been very clear that livestock farming has a far greater impact than plant-based farming. With this in mind, would it not be common sense to reduce the billions in subsidy payments to livestock farming in Europe and offer them to plant-based farming instead as an incentive to a much more sustainable food system?
We have made our proposals based on protecting the farmers because they are, unlike you and I, they're out in all sorts of weathers and in all sorts of market risks. And you and I may not know anything about that because this is their lives. They're producing high quality food for us all so that we can have this particular good quality products available to us at all times. Sometimes under local conditions like organic, more times it's conventional farming. So we provide financial support at the moment for that. And it's a public good that's not always recognised. But the movement of our policy is in the direction of our farmers being centrally involved in providing more public goods. And if you want to do anything in life, you have to pay people. Sometimes I understand that there's a moral obligation and there's people of principle. But most of the time, 99% of the time, they have to get paid. So as professionals that we're expecting to provide good quality food and do more on public goods, we pay our farmers. This is a decision that we make at political level.
Livestock emit methane and nitrous oxide. Now, most people, when they think of climate change, they think of CO2, carbon dioxide, which is a very potent global warming gas. But methane is 25 times more potent per molecule when it's released than CO2. And nitrous oxide is 298 times more potent per molecule than CO2. These are very powerful global warming gases.
So today we have a very special camera called a hyperspectral imaging camera, and it basically enables us to be able to see gases that would be otherwise invisible to the naked eye. And today we're looking at methane gas. Methane is a gas that is being produced by cows when they belch.
متان و سایر گازهایی که تولید می‌کند از سال 1750 میلادی سببساز 1/3 گرمایش جهانی بوده است. احشام بزرگترین منشأ تولید متان مهار شدنی اند. کاهش فوری انتشار متان می‌تواند 15 تا 25 سال از شتاب گرمایش جهانی بکاهد و آن را به مؤثرترین ابزارمان برای کاهش گرمایش در سالهای حساس پیش رو تبدیل کند.
Whoa, look at that. Wow.
قدرت گرمایشی گازهای اقلیمی مختلف را می توانیم در آزمایشی موسوم به آزمایش جذب فروسرخ ببینیم. 4 کره یخی می بینیم، هر یک درون محفظه‌ای عایق. محفظه ها نقش جوی را بازی می کنند که کره زمین را فرا گرفته است. بالای هر کدام یک گرماتاب فروسرخ با دمای یکسان کار گذاشته شده. سپس هر یک با گازی متفاوت پر می شود. محفظه اول را با همان هوای معمولی که هر روز در آن نفس می‌کشیم پر می‌کنیم. دومی را با دی اکسید کربن، یکی از گازهای ناماشنای گلخانه‌ای. سومی را با متان که از گازهای دامپروری است. و محفظه چهارم را با نیتروس اکسید پر می‌کنیم که آن هم یکی دیگر از گازهای دامپروری است. به مرور زمان می‌بینیم که کره محفظه دی اکسید کربن در مقایسه با هوای معمولی آرام آرام شروع به ذوب شدن می‌کند. ولی در همین مدت کوتاه کره‌های متان و نیتروس اکسید شتابان بنای ذوب شدن گذاشته‌اند، چون افزایش دمایشان مشخصاً از هر دو محفظه هوای معمولی و دی اکسید کربن بیشتر است. 16 ساعت بعد تکلیف روشن است. به وضوح می‌توان دید متان و نیتروس اکسید، این دو مهمان ناخوانده خطیر صنعت دامپروری، چه گازهای گرمایش‌زای پرقدرتی اند. از حدوداً 70 میلیارد حیوان غیر دریایی که هر ساله در سراسر دنیا برای مصرف انسان پرورش می‌یابند، 90% مرغ‌اند. افزایش مصرف مرغ دارد معضل جدیدی می‌آفریند. اگرچه رد پای محیط زیستی مرغ از گوشت قرمز کمتر است، اکنون بیش از 90% مرغ‌های دنیا در مجتمع‌های فشرده صنعتی پرورش می‌یابند که آثارش برای کره زمین فاجعه بار است. اگر کالری به دست آمده از پروتئین گوشت را به مصاف همان مقدار کالری از پروتئین‌های گیاهی مثل نخود ببریم، مرغ از گوشت‌های قرمز معمول ضربه کمتری به محیط زیست می‌زند. اما همچنان تولید هر کالری از پروتئینش 40 برابر گرمایش زاتر و 50 برابر آب برتر از نخود خواهد بود.
We know that if we would shift from ruminant meats to other meats, then we probably would reduce our footprint just from that particular product by about a factor of 10, which is quite a bit. But if you compare that with how much you would reduce your footprint if you went to plant-based products, that is about a factor of 100. And that's the reason why shifting towards more plant-based diets has such a big impact, because we're really talking about different scales here.
گوشت ارگانیک مدعی سوء آثار محیط زیستی و اقلیمی کمتری است. اما دانشمندان دانشگاه آکسفورد در پژوهششان تفاوت معنادار چندانی بین انتشار گازهای گلخانه‌ای گوشت ارگانیک و گوشت معمولی نیافتند.
So in our data we didn't find big differences between organic and conventional across multiple indicators. What we did find is that no matter how you produce animal products, even the lowest impact forms of production still create higher emissions and use more land than typical vegetable proteins. So that's saying something really important. That's saying that even if you go into the shops and try and purchase sustainable meat or dairy, it's always going to be better to purchase vegetable proteins instead.
دولت آمریکا سالانه حدود 20 میلیون دلار یارانه به کاشت میوه و تره‌بار اختصاص می‌دهد. اما صنایع گوشت و لبنیات یارانه سرسام‌آور 38 میلیارد دلاری دریافت می‌کنند. تخمین می‌زنند سالانه 314 میلیارد دلار از جیب مالیات دهندگان آمریکا بابت بیماری‌های ناشی از مصرف گوشت و لبنیات این کشور پرداخت می‌شود.
When you cram, tens of thousands of animals in these cramped, filthy, unhygienic conditions, basically live atop their feces. It's just like a breeding ground. Animal to human diseases that arise because of the way we're now treating animals, whether it's these live animal markets in East Asia, whether it's the bushmeat trade. And the concern is that with enough spins at genetic roulette on these swine factory farms, these chicken factory farms, we're gonna, end up with one of these viruses that's not only deadly to chickens, but can jump and transmit human to human and cause the next human pandemic.
The risk of large-scale factory farming increases the risk that or the likelihood that we might have a pandemic, particularly of influenza in the future.
This pandemic has been very severe, but this is not necessarily the big one.
منشأ آنفولانزای خوکی را که بیش از 500,000 نفر قربانی گرفت، پرورش خوک می‌دانند. علت پیدایش ایدز و ویروس ابولا را خوردن حیوانات وحشی و سرمنشأ مرس را خوردن شیر و گوشت شتر دانستند. گمان می‌رود که سارس همچون دنیاگیری اخیر کووید 19 از بازارهای خیس حیوانات زنده شیوع یافته باشد. منشأ آنفولانزای مرغی را مزارع پرورش مرغ و بازارهای خیس حیوانات زنده می‌دانند و منشأ سرخک را نیز گاوهای پرورشی.
People know now what a global pandemic feels like. They've seen the effects. They will be feeling the effects for many years to come. And that this is a chance, I think, an opportunity to point out that this particular route of infection is a very concerning one.
سازمان جهانی بهداشت از ظهور قریب الوقوع عصر پس آنتیبیوتیک خبر داده است که در آن خراشی جزئی روی دست می‌تواند کشنده باشد. آنتیبیوتیک های معجزه آسای نجات بخشمان با مصرف بی‌رویه دارند اثر بخشی خود را از دست می دهند. نه مصرف بی‌رویه انسان که مصرف روزانه اش برای میلیاردها حیوان پرورشی دنیاست که دارد ما را به این روز می اندازد.
So having been a butcher for 6 years, one thing I know is that if people knew what happened in the production of their food, they wouldn't eat meat. So one of the things that we would hit every day was pus nodules, tumors, cysts. It was something that we would hit on a daily basis. Having worked in a supermarket chain, I saw this firsthand every single day. So here's one that's running along the shoulder blade. Oh. Yeah, that is what I remember in the butchery. It comes out like a thick toothpaste. I remember that every single day.
That's interesting to hear you had that experience all the way over there, because in the UK, exactly the same.
Yeah.
We would see that on a daily basis. But those people who say it's not my butcher does this, they need to open their eyes, because if their butcher's being honest with them, we know. Yeah. We both know. And any honest butcher's going to admit it. They're not going to want to tell the public because it's going to affect their business. Yeah. But it is a fact.
And me working in multiple butcheries, I saw these common trends across the board. So I know that it wasn't just isolated to the one that I was working in. It was across the board for me.
People need to reconnect with what they're eating, and the whole process that we're talking about here of how that food gets to them is hidden from them, and it's hidden for a reason. Because if they saw it, it would most definitely make them want to think harder about what they're eating.
گرمتر شدن اقیانوس‌ها و جو پیرامونمان دارد چرخه‌های آبی سیاره را برهم می‌زند.
Climate change changes the water cycles of the planet. The heat that's being generated is forcing the precipitation into the clouds, so we're getting more concentrated precipitation in our clouds and more dramatic, extreme, and unpredictable water events all over the world.
در شمال تایوان از جزایر کرانه اقیانوس آرام، مردم آتایل در ارتفاعات کوهستان زندگی می‌کنند. تایوان با آب و هوای نابسامان غریبه نیست، اما در سالهای اخیر بر تعداد و شدت طوفان‌هایش افزوده شده است که رد ویرانگرش را بر مردم آتایل و زندگیشان بر جای گذاشته است.
Nyakna yavata utukayan. Wala kaniga juhian mahlaga yuan yu maha mukung mahsyakeh. Joro laki kucipok na toki ka. Yava utukayan menyak naksya ka joro bala menyak ne. Ini pejuh menyak na wi. Kabaw na ka, siga, daukah tananak mengedung. Naga ta, niyan yakah na orasyaw. Yakah lungan dalah, lungun dalaga, niyan mahsyakah.
گرچه طغیان سیل‌های بی‌امان در بسیاری مناطق دنیا رو به افزایش گذاشته است، جاهای دیگر سیر معکوسی می‌پیمایند. خشکسالی در نقاط روزافزونی از دنیا به پیش می‌تازد، هزاران تن محصول زراعی را برباد می‌دهد و میلیون‌ها کشاورز را در یافتن آب ناکام می‌گذارد.
I'm definitely worried about the future of our farm. I think we're seeing, much more, many more swings in climate than we've seen in the past. But we want to use all the land that we have to grow food, but we haven't been able to just because of the shortages of water. It'll have an impact on food supply and prices and availability. And so estimates now are between 500,000 to over 1 million acres of farmland that'll come out of production in California.
آلمریا در جنوب اسپانیا میزبان 31,000 هکتار مزرعه گلخانه‌ای تره‌بار است. نیمی از میوه و تره‌بار تازه اروپا همینجا تولید می شود، جزئی حیاتی از سیستم تأمین غذایی این قاره. اما اسپانیا با خشکسالی 20 ساله‌ای دست به گریبان بوده است. اقلیم شناسان از پیوند تنگاتنگ این خشکسالی نگران کننده با تغییر اقلیم خبر داده‌اند.
In terms of water, the truth is that the drought in Spain has become a complete catastrophe. Our harvests are decreasing in massive quantities. Last year, in the area we are now, there was almost no harvest. People don't realize the food system is collapsing.
برهم خوردن سامانه جهانی اقلیم بر خشکسالی آفریقا دامن زده است. رودخانه‌ها و دریاچه‌هایی که آب شیرین صدها میلیون نفر را تأمین می‌کنند، رو به خشکی نهاده‌اند. با تشدید منازعات بر سر این منابع رو به اتمام، نخستین جرقه‌های مهاجرت سراسری مردم به سوی مناطق شمالی دیده می‌شود. مهاجرتی از جنس مرگ و زندگی. این پناهجویان اقلیمی که سواحل اروپا را به چشم پناهگاهی می‌بینند، حاضرند به هر قیمتی خود و خانواده‌شان را به این مناطق برسانند. اسپانیا در مواجهه با خیل عظیم مهاجران، حصاری بلند در امتداد جنوبی ترین مرز خود در ملیلا کشیده است. هجوم روزافزون هزاران پناهجو به سوی این حصار مرزی، پلیس اسپانیا را تحت فشار بی‌امانی قرار داده است. با تشدید پیشبینی شده این الگوهای مهاجرتی، هر روز روشن‌تر می شود که دنیایمان آمادگی مواجهه با آن را ندارد.
Osbal, Andral, Oskuigerbet, Mogelpur.
صحرای گوبی در خاک مغولستان به پیش می‌تازد و همچون هیولایی که حیاتی بر سر راهش باقی نمی‌گذارد، بسیاری از دریاچه‌های زندگی بخش مردم و حیات وحش را خشکانده است. تداوم نابودی دریاچه‌ها مردم را به ترک خانه‌هایشان و گریختن به سرزمین‌های دور و غریب واخواهد داشت.
Монгол улс тэгшхэн сайхан байсан цаг саяхан санагдах юм. Хөгшчүүл хангаа дэлхийн нэг л өөр болоод байна гэж байна. Монголчууд байгаль дэлхийдээ дасан зогцож амьдэрсаар ирсэн. Гэхдээ байгаль орчин арай л дэндүү огцом хөвсөж байна удаа гэж. Энэ дэлхий дээр ам өрсөж үлдэхийн тулд их л төвчээртэй хатуужилтай байх хэрэгтэй болох нь дээ.
A lot of people talk about how much fresh water we use for hydrofracking. 700 billion gallons globally is wasted on fracking. So 700 billion gallons. Sounds like a lot, but animal agriculture, the production of animals that we use for meat around the globe, uses 70 trillion gallons of fresh water a year, hundreds of thousands of times as much as fracking. And I know what some of you are thinking right now. You're thinking, oh, here's the part. I'm a vegetarian and pigs are people too, meh. But no. Let's ignore how the animals are treated in our factory torture farming. Let's pretend they're treated amazing for just a minute. It's like a celebrity backstage at the Oscars. They're just being fawned over and they get swag bags with free Apple Watches. Point is, you should still be upset about this because animal agriculture is killing us. And corporate media is fantastically pathetic on this topic. They never mention meat production. They never mention that a quarter pounder takes 660 gallons of fresh water to create. That's the equivalent of showering for 2 months.
So one usually underestimated impact of livestock production is the huge amounts of fresh water required for that production to be maintained and to be increased.
The problem is that in many places, water is being used much faster than the natural renewal rates. Overall, in the world, 1.8 billion people are living in areas with severe water scarcity. The livestock sector is the single biggest water user in the world. 1/3 of the water use in the world is being used for producing animal products, meat and dairy. And it's not because those animals drink so much, it's really because there's a lot of water required to make the feed for the animals.
If we want enough fresh water for future generations, water alone dictates that we must change our diet away from meat and dairy.
در تمام دنیا نشانه‌هایی از روی آوردن مردم به غذاهای غیر حیوانی به چشم می‌خورد. آنقدر که کورسویی از امید در دلمان بتاباند. در سال 2021 میلادی 580,000 نفر در بریتانیا به کارزار ژانویه وگان پیوستند و برآورد می شود اکنون بیش از 4 میلیون نفر در بریتانیا خود را وگان می دانند. طبق برآوردها 10% جمعیت کانادا اکنون وگان یا ویژیتریان است و در آمریکا نیز بالای 50% رستوران‌ها غذای وگان به فهرست غذایشان افزوده‌اند و در 3 سال اخیر سبک زندگی وگان رشدی 600% به خود دیده است.
A few years ago, it was quite a challenge to get hold of good vegan food, but today we're pretty much spoilt for choice, and there are vegan options everywhere.
Thanks. It tastes like a normal hot dog. Is it a normal hot dog? Like, as in, like, or is this like plant-based or something?
So it is actually plant-based, yeah. So
it's really nice. I prefer it because I don't really eat meat that much, so this is good.
Okay.
Well, I like meat and it tastes good.
Yeah.
For not being meat.
Would you be happy with that?
Yeah, I'd be stoked. I love meat too much, so I feel like if I went plant-based, I'd miss it. But if this like stuff tastes the same, yeah, I'd be very happy with this.
Nice messy fingers.
It is, yeah. That's a good burger. Thank you.
Would it interest you to know that that's completely plant-based?
And I wouldn't know. So that I would definitely, wow, that's a winner. Yeah, I'm amazed.
If burgers always tasted like that, would you be happy to just not eat a beef burger again?
Yeah, no, I got a good veg, yeah.
Yeah?
I'd like you to tell me which one of these nuggets is plant-based and which one is real meat.
Okay. It's very hard to say which one is.
They taste exactly the same, honestly.
These are not the chicken.
No.
That's interesting.
Which one of this is animal meat, and which one of this is plant-based? Meat or not meat? You're not sure? You're not sure?
You're not, yeah, I'm not sure. Meat.
You?
Yes.
Are wrong.
Okay. Okay.
But you think the second one was chicken?
Yeah.
The second one was actually plant-based.
No way.
Yeah, and the first one was chicken. Yeah.
Okay, I didn't. No, I couldn't have guessed that. I definitely thought the first one. Yeah, definitely.
It seems that changing what we eat to a more sustainable diet can also coincidentally be very beneficial to our health. There is a growing understanding that we can actually prevent, and in many cases even reverse, some of our most common diseases, all through a shift towards a whole food vegan diet.
Humans can survive on many different kinds of diet, but many decades of research has now shown us that the best way of not just surviving, but truly thriving is on a whole food plant-based diet.
A human can be healthy on a plant-based diet without any animal products. The major dietetic associations around the world, including the British Dietetic Association, have produced statements to say exactly that a diet made up of whole plant foods is healthy for humans all stages of their life.
And not only can they be healthy, but they can restore or reclaim their health adopting a plant-based diet.
There are certain areas, certain populations around the world that have extraordinary health and longevity. For example, the largest number of centenarians, people that live over 100, these so-called blue zones.
What's really interesting about the blue zones, they actually have more centenarians than anywhere else in the world. And a centenarian is someone that lives at least 100 years. But what's really interesting about the blue zones is when people reach these advanced ages, they are still productive. So the blue zones have taught us a lot. And the bottom line is we really want to try to emulate what the people of the blue zones are doing.
این 5 ناحیه موسوم به نواحی آبی رنگ عبارتند از اوکیناوای ژاپن، ساردینیای ایتالیا، ایکاریای یونان، نیکویای کاستاریکا و لومالیندای کالیفرنیا.
So the question is, well, what do they all have in common?
They have a predominantly plant-based diet. They have a diet rich in fruits and vegetables, whole grains, beans, soy, lentils, chickpeas. They have a diet rich in all these nutrients, and that's one thing that they have in common.
So the EPIC study is the European Prospective Investigation into Cancer and Nutrition. It followed over 500,000 individuals from 10 European countries for more than 15 years. Those in the EPIC study that were eating predominantly plant-based or eating high levels of fruits and vegetables lived longer, had lower incidence of cancer and heart disease. About 2,500 of the individuals in the EPIC Oxford only ate plant food, so they were vegan. And even though they weren't the most healthy vegans or healthy plant eaters, you could show that these plant eaters were healthier. They had a lower incidence of heart disease, diabetes, and cancer.
From everything we have discovered on this journey, it seems that moving away from animal foods to plant-based foods instead can not only give us a whole host of amazing health benefits, but also gives us a chance to be able to leave a sustainable planet for future generations to come. Perhaps the single most meaningful change that we can make as individuals is ultimately deciding what ends up each day on our plates.
We are running out of time. The world community must acknowledge that animal agriculture is the most destructive industry on our planet. We can't wait for government policies and other organizations to create a better life for ourselves. We need to stand up now and make our voices heard.
Globally, for the typical consumer, avoiding meat and dairy is probably the single biggest way to reduce your impact on Earth.
Without addressing what we eat, we simply won't make it.
This is a #1 priority. This is a next step in taking responsibility for our communities, our planet, our biosphere, our fellow species.
People say, what can I do as an individual? It feels overwhelming. Well, you can make individual choices. We all can. Our individual choices affect the collective choices. When you hear about airplanes and cars, and we're still going to use those things. But the choices we make in our diet, this agricultural business where we use animals as the primary source of protein, the one thing I think we can all do is, and individuals, is make our own individual choices, how we're going to live, how we're going to eat. Plant-based diet makes all the difference in the world. Just make some choices that are good for you, and being good for you will be good for the planet.
این سیاره خانه ماست. سرنوشتش با دستان ما رقم می‌خورد. تاریخ نشان داده است وقتی دست در دست پشت آرمان واحدی می‌ایستیم، می‌درخشیم. پیش رویمان فرصتی است برای کاشت نهال شکوفایی در این دنیا. اما ثانیه‌ها می‌گذرد و فرصت رو به اتمام است.